I just am so awed at what God has done here. And I want to tell you our story, but I want you to remember as I'm telling you our story that our story is just a little bitty piece of God's great big story, and he's using you guys in his story, and that's what this is all about. So what I want to do is take you back a little bit. And in 1993, the ministry started Operation Christmas Child when they took distribution to Bosnia. They partnered with a gentleman from Wales who came up with this idea, and they took that very first shipment of shoeboxes to Bosnia and wove through all of the difficulties that they had to go through to deliver those boxes during a war. And it was a great success. It was a really, really good thing, and everybody thoroughly enjoyed being able to do it and had amazing stories to tell. But one of the things that they came back with, and I love to listen to our leadership talk about this, is giving the boxes was a really wonderful thing. But they knew that if we couldn't attach the gospel to it, that this wasn't something that God was calling them to do. And so they prayed about that, and at that time, that's when they decided to go ahead and attach the gospel with the delivery of these boxes. And so many of you are familiar with the booklet, The Greatest Gift. That came out of that eventually, where each child hears the gospel presented to them in their own language and then receive that booklet with their shoebox. So when your shoebox is delivered, there's also a gospel presentation in that child's language delivered with it. So the ministry was growing, and one of the things I love to hear the staff talk about is when they made that decision to couple the gospel with it. Jim Harrelson likes to talk about how God breathed into this ministry, and it just exploded, and it took off. And we were part of that explosion. And in 1999, that's the first record we have of any fellowship boxes that were packed, and there were 90 shoe boxes packed that year. That year, there also was a woman in Conway. Her name was Connie Stahl. She had just moved here from the East Coast, and she was familiar with Operation Christmas Child, and she decided she wanted to set up a drop-off location in this area. And so she set up a drop-off location at First Press. So for a couple years, First Press was the drop-off location here, and they did a really good job for a number of years, but then realized they had other things they needed to attend to. So Antioch became the drop-off location, and they did that for a number of years. But most of you know, Antioch also does Bethlehem Revisited at that time of year, and they were finding that it was really difficult to host both the drop-off location and to prepare for that. So at the very last minute, in 2024, 2 weeks before National Collection Week, Chris Bridwell, who had been serving over there as a short-term volunteer during National Collection Week, she offered to bring that to fellowship.
In 2004.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
You said 24.
Oh,
2004.
no, yeah, 2004. That's why we're here for 20 years. So back in 2004, she brought it to fellowship, and we were a little bitty drop-off at the time. We had a few churches that were coming in through here, but Chris was faithful to take that, and she could see what God was doing and wanted to bring that to fellowship. In 2020, and I'm going to do that through the whole thing. In 2005, she asked Joanne McKelvey and I to take that, and Joanne and I agreed, but realized we had no idea what we were doing. We looked at each other a number of times and just said, we have no idea. So we just started praying about it, and we signed our agreement with Operation Christmas Child to do that the following year. But God knew what he was up to, and God knew what he was doing. And it's been really fun just to watch how he has brought volunteers, how he's brought donors, how he's brought other drop-off locations. We didn't know what we were doing, but we prayed about it. And actually, what I want to do is I want to share a couple images with you. So the room you're sitting in right now did not exist back then. And the atrium behind us didn't exist. And the big children's wing over on the other side of the property didn't exist. We were having services in what is now the youth room, and that little bitty space in front of that was our foyer, and that's where we collected shoeboxes. So in those early years, as I said, we had no clue. We didn't know, do people bring shoeboxes on Saturday? And actually 20 years later, we still don't know who's going to show up on what day. But we didn't know if people were going to show up. And we were sitting here one Saturday And cars started coming and boxes started coming through the door. And we were overwhelmed pretty quickly and didn't know exactly what to do. And about that time, some of you will remember Jim and Jody Alexander, Big Jim, our mailman. He and his wife drove by and they saw the line of cars. So they drove in and they walked in and said, "Hey, can we help?" And a couple minutes later, Richard Knapp, who used to come by our property every Saturday and try and pick up the trash, stuck his head in the door and said, "Can you help? Can I help with this?" And before you know it, we had an entire group of volunteers that were here helping. God brought just the right people who needed to be here at just the right time. So at that time, we were actually, they called it a relay center, not a drop-off location. We were a relay center at that time, which meant that our shoeboxes had to go down to Little Rock. And so Mark Brandt would drive the borrowed ERA truck, and Thad Wells would bring his Pepperidge Farm truck, and we would load all of those cartons into those trucks and make multiple trips on that last Sunday night down to Little Rock to drop off our shoeboxes. Then in 2007, God was so gracious, and he granted us this new building. And we added the atrium, and we added the sanctuary, and we moved in. And again, the ministry was able to expand. And we looked around one day as we were sitting in the atrium in a break. We had been here for a couple hours collecting shoeboxes. And Ken and I realized we have all of these volunteers here, and it's lunchtime. And so it was our first run to Wendy's for lunch to try and feed everybody and keep them here for the last 2 hours. But what that did start was the beginning of people in our body seeing that need. And Linda Starr started bringing us snacks from Sam's. And the women at the well started making soup for us so we'd have lunch every day during National Collection Week. And so the body was gradually becoming more and more involved with us. Then again in 2009, God breathed hugely into this ministry when the ministry introduced the Greatest Journey. And the Greatest Journey is that 12-week discipleship program. So now not only were the kids hearing about Jesus, but they were having the opportunity to be discipled, for multiplication to happen, for churches to be planted. God was on the move, and the ministry just exploded. That's about the same time that the women at the well started wrapping boxes. So Joanne, who had helped me early in the beginning, she found that her niche was cutting the paper for all of these beautiful boxes that you see around the building today. And she began, the women at the well, wrapping shoeboxes. And now they wrap thousands of shoeboxes for us every year. In addition, we added our dedication Sunday when we have our family members here who know different languages come and pray over the boxes in different languages. And then in 2015, our team had grown enough, and I just want to say here real quick, I didn't do this first hour. The team that has participated here for years, they understand what this means. And Ken's going to talk about this a little bit later, but the enemy's looking for ways to disrupt things. And so we used to meet in the old library up in the second story, and we talked about the target on the door. And over the years, that team has seen so much. They have fought battles. We have prayed and prayed as Satan has attacked in health issues and family members lost and finances and job issues. But God has been faithful, and he has kept that team, and he has kept this body through all of that. But in 2015, that team went to a conference that they were hosting in Dallas, the Operation Christmas Child annual conference. And one of the things that they did is they had a display called Into the Darkness. And it was this really awesome opportunity, but we all walked through at different times during the weekend. And when we gathered back together, everybody was really, really impacted. And we realized some of these boxes are going to and need to go to really hard to reach areas. That we have partners on the other side who are risking their lives and doing some really hard work. And that Into the Darkness display helped our group understand what a special pack was. And that was the year we came back and did our first special pack. How many of you were here last week as we packed boxes for the special pack? Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. This celebrated our 10th year of doing that, where we're packing those boxes that go to really hard to reach locations. So now we had a big enough area that not only were we a drop-off, but Chris had also found a really sweet spot for herself on the team, and she became our logistics coordinator. And she had been going around to the 6 counties around us and building drop-off locations in those 6 counties. So now those 6 counties were bringing their shoeboxes here, as well as the shoeboxes that were coming through our own doors. And so at that point, we had to have trailers on our location, our own semi-trailers. And so at one point, Eric Martin and Felix Mall built that beautiful ramp for us that so many of you have seen to help us get those shoeboxes on those. And John Moss now even donates our trailers so that the ministry doesn't have to pay for that. At the time, I was the area coordinator. I became the area coordinator, and so Julie Schock stepped into the role of being the drop-off, the drop-off team lead. She's done an amazing job with that. I used to run this, and I called it barely controlled chaos. Julie does it now, and it runs like a well-oiled machine. Julie became our central drop-off team lead, and then when Ken and I became regional area coordinators, Anita Peterson became the area coordinator for our 6-county area. So now our area actually has 29 team members and a full leadership team. God has grown this. He has grown this in so many ways, with shoebox packers and with the team and people from the community that are participating. Now we have a year-round team. We have a National Collection Week group of those of you who come to join us, of over 100 people during National Collection Week every year. We have 6 drop-off locations that feed into this central drop-off location, and we have loads and loads of donors. One of the things we talk about in Operation Christmas Child is that we want to see what God is doing on both sides of the box. We want to have opportunities to share Him on both sides. And I just want to give you a real quick glimpse into some of the things that we've gotten to see over the years. We see parents who bring their small kiddos in an attempt to teach them how to serve and to give. We see elderly couples who come who still want to keep serving. We saw the woman who had cancer, and her treatments were so harsh that she could barely walk to our front door, but she wanted to make sure that her box got delivered to a child across the globe. People have come to give in memory of people that they have lost. We had a mom with several kiddos who showed up one year who just needed a meal. And so we shared from our snack table, and we cleaned out our lunch leftovers and sent her home with food and got her connected with the ministry center. We see people who come with loads and loads of shoe boxes that they're giving out of their plenty. And we see those who come with their one shoebox that they have brought out of their lack. We saw many who came even when they were afraid of COVID, but they still showed up with their shoeboxes. And one of the best privileges we have is we get to pray with our donors that come. And it's been such a privilege that when we have pastors who show up, who they spend their weeks praying over their congregation, get to walk through our doors, and they get us to pray over them. We see people struggling just in so many ways, bringing us their boxes. It's been such a privilege to be a testimony in our community. I've always said that's one of my favorite secondary things about this is, as churches, sometimes we disagree over the silliest of things. But for the unbelieving community in Conway to be able to see the believing churches in Conway come together to do this project is huge. So that brings us to our 20th anniversary today. And I want to give you 3 visuals of what this actually looks like. So first of all, and this is the one that just blows me away the most, if you're on our team, would you please stand if you're on our area team? And if you've ever been on our area team, would you please stand? Because there are a number of you here as well. Caldwell, you need to stand up. And if you have ever brought snacks for our volunteers during the week, would you stand up? Or if you've brought lunch for volunteers during the week, would you please stand up?
Thank you so much.
If you have come and volunteered during that week to help pack cartons or to load trucks, would you stand up? That's just amazing to me. Amazing. If you've ever packed a box, either a live, real, like tangible, you're holding it in your arms box, or you've gone online and you've packed a box through our Build a Shoebox online, would you please stand? So I need you to take just a second and look around this room, and then you need to multiply this by 2 because we did this last hour as well, and the room looked just like this. God took just a small handful of people in the beginning, and look at what he's done. This is him working in your hearts and working in this church family. It's amazing to me what he has done here. Thank you. You can go ahead and sit down. Then the second thing I want to show you is God has just given us such an opportunity. We're such a fortunate church. We have so many people from our body who have been on the mission field in the past and who are on the mission field now. I just am humbled every time I walk by that wall out there with our missionaries on it. But this is something that God has done through each and every one of you sitting here. And if you can put up our list for us here. Ken and I sat down this week and we wrote down all the places that we knew that our boxes had gone. There are other places, but these are 21 countries that we know our boxes went to. And as we went through that list, there were actually 3 countries on that list that we couldn't put on this PowerPoint because they're sensitive enough countries that we can't publicize where those boxes have been. And you'll see on there that it says at the bottom that there are numerous hard-to-reach countries that they've been to. That's where our special access boxes go to, and even some of your personal pack boxes have gone to hard-to-reach areas. All of those countries have been touched because of your efforts here. And then the last thing I want to show you, I have a couple people on our team who are going to come up and help me with this part. I want to show you the actual shoe boxes. Now, if you were listening closely, you would have heard Alex tell this in the very beginning, but if you guys will come on up, and we're going to take a second and celebrate what he's actually done here. Sorry, Leah. So we've been doing this. Fellowship has actually been packing for 25 years because we started in 99, but our drop-off location is 20 years old today. So we actually are missing something. This isn't right. Wait. Where to go. Okay, so I'm going to move. I need you guys to see. That is like a huge number. Can you see that? 209,387 shoe boxes have come through the doors here in 20 years. That is a huge number of shoe boxes. And of that, Fellowship, you packed 71,832 of those. But while they're standing here, I want you to do some math in your head with me, and we're going to do some extrapolation, because one of the things the ministry talks about is that for every shoebox that gets delivered, between 7 to 10 people get exposed to the gospel. They get to hear the gospel presentation in one way or another through each shoebox. So if you take that 71,000 that Fellowship has done, and you multiply that by 7, 502,824 individuals have had the opportunity to hear the gospel because of the boxes that you're packing. And if you take this number and multiply this by 7, I can hardly get past this. 1,465,709 people have had the opportunity to hear the gospel because of your work. I don't know about you, but I think that's hugely worth celebrating. That's big. Thank you, guys. Thank you. You guys can stay up for a minute. I keep cutting you off. So as they're going back to their seats, there's one more thing I want to share with you real quick. And this may just be me. This may not fall on you all the same way it did on me. But a couple weeks ago, we were at one of our team meetings, and we were praying through some things. And I kept thinking of this verse, and it's Romans 10:14-15. How then can they call on the one that they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And it hit me like a 2x4 over my head. My feet have never been in Madagascar, but the shoebox that held the shoes that are on my feet went to Madagascar. From the very beginning, God has had this amazing plan. And your feet are in those places through shoe boxes. The irony of that and the creativity of our God just totally blows me away. He has known from the beginning of time what he wanted to do, how he wanted to share the good news with those throughout the globe. He's waiting for more and more to come to know him. He's writing a big, huge story. Yes, these are things that have happened here, but this is God's story that he's telling. We know the beginning of the story, and we know the end of the story. And all he's asking us to do is to be faithful in the middle of that. So thank you for being faithful for 20 years, and I hope we'll be faithful for 20 more.